Wait, okay, the recording is
I kind of
starting.
regretted it now.
Then
Okay.
you take over, I'll just butt in for questions.
Oo nga eh. So should I have a like, quick introduction to everyone? We've got what 39 participants in the house right now. Yeah, some names I recognize, others yeah, I don't recognize the others, but yeah. So welcome to our show, everyone. We're we want this to be as free, flowing as possible, true to the character of DS. We are um, we find order in chaos, and we want to learn from each other as much as possible. In as much as I am going to ask the questions and to lead the discussion, but I'm also hoping that the rest of you, now there are 42 of us in the house, will also pitch in. And JP Manahan, I'm not being divayish. I am just being me. I'm just being being the teacher that I am. RB, thank you so much for being with us. What time is it there now? You're in London, aren't you?
So I'm normally in London. I'm currently in Edinburgh to escape the chaos of London. It's 10 a.m. now here, so it's like my
Okay,
working day.
and what is the situation like in Edinburgh? Are people around? Are people outside? Are the people still eating scones? Are they? Uh, are
No, but like they've announced the
having
total
tea?
lockdown a few days ago. So now, like, they're very strict about it. You can't go out if you can't meet with other people. You can't be in a group outside except for the people that you live with. No non-essential travel. So yeah, total lockdown talaga. But apart from that, it's like really peaceful. Although like people are still panic buying, I think, but it's been reduced now the last few days. So yeah.
Are you working from home, or are you just
Hmm.
enjoying your time
Working from
watching
home. So
Netflix?
like our office was closed, and we're not allowed to go into the office. Everyone's working from home. Well, those who can work from home should work from home. So yeah.
Right. Okay. So what I want to do for the rest of our session, we have about an hour, no? Tama ba? An
Yeah.
hour? Yes, we have an hour. An hour. Your time is precious. We understand that. Um, we 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 want to understand essentially what life has been like for you from the time that you were a DS student. I just have to admit somebody here. Yes, from the time that you were a student to the time that you are now a development. Well, we've got wow, quite blockbuster here, RB. A lot of people want to know about you and from you. Um, we want to know what life has been like for you and how okay, Leland will take care of admissions. So what development studies has taught you, and essentially the whole gamut, diba? And whether ako personally, because I teach sociology of development, you know that I'm very much interested in whether there has been an ideological shift for you, you know, from the time that from the time that you were the progressive student that you presented yourself as back in college to, to who you are right now at the peak of international development. So let's begin from the very start, at the very beginning. You took up development studies. Why were you in development studies? What happened to you afterwards, and so forth?
Okay.
This is your
Sige.
show, Art.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jayu. And yeah, just for everybody's knowledge, actually, Jayu was my thesis advisor when I was in Ateneo. So that
Is it
relationship.
something you're proud of?
Yes, of course, naman. I'm really proud of that. Yeah, and that was quite an experience. But anyway, I studied development studies in Ateneo because, well, firstly, I didn't even know development studies exist. I think like maybe a lot of people from my batch, maybe not now anymore. Ngayon, so many people are asking about development studies in Ateneo Freedom Wall, and like the profile is higher now. But before, like, I don't think it was like that, and I didn't even know it existed. I only read about it in the brochure when you get admitted to Ateneo, and there's like a write-up. I originally wanted to be a lawyer, so I took up
You
development
did.
studies. Yeah, I did. Yeah, because I thought like, oh, this looks like a good pre-law course, and I'm interested in like politics and sociology and economics. That was like my interest. So I was like, okay, fine, let's do it. And then obviously I started in Ateneo, and I started like learning about development theory, and I think. Actually, maybe like you guys don't know it because you only saw the progressive side of me, like the Marxist side of me. But like in the first year or maybe first couple of months that I was in Ateneo, I was actually like looking back. I didn't know the term before, but now I can say like I was actually quite right wing. Like I was like, oh yeah, poor people are poor because they're lazy, ganyan, like like that type of thinking.
Sorry,
And then
say that again. You were like that in the past. You're not like that now.
no, yeah, in the past, in like the
Okay,
very
okay.
beginning. Like,
We just
yeah,
wanted
like,
to be clear.
yeah, I hope that's clear. That's not me at all right now. And then something that really changed my mind, and I know this may sound silly, but watching the documentary called Capitalism: A Love Story by Michael Moore. Then I saw that, and then also during this time, uso yung Tumblr. And then there were a lot of like political, I don't know, like communities and political bloggers on Tumblr. And so feeling ko that was the time when I was like discovering my own ideas and my own ideology. So I became very, as Jill says, very sort of like radical. In fact, for our batch, we had to come up with like a title for our yearbook, like I don't know, the funny one or the clown or whatever title you want. So I wrote for mine, the next Karl Marx, because I was like, yes, Karl Marx is like, I was such that kind of person. And yes,
Time out.
yeah.
No, time out. Yeah, you Occupy Job Fair. So Leland pointed that out. You led Occupy Job Fair, a very controversial moment in the history of the Ateneo, the Manila University.
Indeed,
That was how
yes.
your Marxism manifested itself.
Yeah, so so basically I think that was the final year ba yun, fourth year. And then there was a
Yes.
job fair organized by the university. And we noticed that around like maybe 95% of the stalls in this job fair were like corporations and for management people and for targeted at like management students. And so we were thinking, grabe naman, like JG Som is just 1/4 of the school, but the jobs that you're promoting are like 90% catered to them. And at that time, it was also during the Occupy movement worldwide. So yeah, people protesting against corporate power. Dun kinoin yung term na the 99%, so versus the 1%. And so, yeah, and so a bunch of us who were School of Social Sciences and School of Humanities students were like, we should really protest against this. So yeah, we led a protest and we called it Occupy Job Fair, and we actually did like a silent walk across the job fair, and then we like just stood there with our banners, and then people were mocking us. Like there were some management students who were mocking us when we were there, and then there was also the Facebook group for our batch, or maybe for the wider school, I can't remember, and then there were lots of debates there. Yeah,
I see. Yeah, so that was how you. But you made a huge difference, to be honest, because after that, specific career fairs were held for the development sector.
yes, yeah. I think didn't it start as like parang nagkaroon ng development job fair organized by
Uh-oh.
yes department. I think that was after a year now. And yeah, like the day after the job fair, actually, I think like there was a dialogue opened up to students, and then like some people from the admin spoke. But it was like a really tense few days because there were like rumors going around, like people saying, "Oh, they're gonna like expel those who joined the job fair protest." So yeah, I think yeah, small activism that we did, which hopefully
Yeah, for well,
contributed.
for what it's worth, you left a mark there. Christina is asking, was the Occupy Job Fair Sangu organized, RB?
No, no. So it was not. I think the conversation, what Jenica said was that Sang was stressing out because they weren't sure how to handle the protesters. So it was really like a student-led protest. It was not organized by Sang. It was just like a bunch of us who were like, I don't know, radicals or whatever in the university.
Right, right, right. And Christina has another question. What was the turnout of students? Yeah, so she's interested um, in the impact. What was the
Yeah.
turnout of students who mobilized? Yeah.
I can't remember. Maybe like up to 20 students actually joined the protest with like signs and everything. But there was also lots of support on social media. So because the protest was just the one thing, it was a lot of it was in the day leading up to it on social media and lots of like
Mm,
debate online. But yeah, but I think also back then there was no woke culture. So ngayon, I think young people are very lucky because um, there's now a woke culture, and it's cool to be woke, and parang there's this the norms have shifted towards more radical politics. But I think it's fair to say that back then it wasn't like that. Like there was no culture of wokeness. Parang it was still a minority view in university, and then eventually over time it's become like that.
right, right. RB, a few of our um, a few of us in the audience are in fact senior students writing their thesis in the midst of this quarantine. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what you wrote for your undergraduate thesis?
Yeah.
What made you choose it? Yeah, and was that influential later on in your career choice and other things related to your career? For some people,
Yeah.
kasi diba, that's a pattern. The thesis is really indicative of
Yeah.
your career preference, right? Tell us about your thesis, and then tell us, was it something that you eventually pursued later on, or you eventually threw it out the window?
So I was very much influenced by the social currents of the time. So I wrote my undergrad thesis on the Occupy Wall Street movement specifically. And what
Oh
I did
gosh, I
was
remember.
what I did was I analyzed the sort of like the ideology behind the Occupy Wall Street movement through online discourse analysis. So like looking at their online media, and then I was like coding it. Because at the time when I was an undergrad, I was very much interested in like social media culture and online culture before memes were as popular as they are now, and before memes were taken seriously. I was very proud that in 2010 I wrote like a 20-page paper for one of my classes explaining the sort of like the political and sociological importance of memes. I was like, this is gonna be important in the future. Now people are using it as something for like joking, but this is actually gonna be important later. And now we see that it is important. So I was very much interested in online culture. But yeah, so I wrote about Occupy Wall Street, and I
Mm-hmm.
tried to analyze the ideology behind it. I was very much influenced by Gilles. Like he sort of like influenced me on which political framework to use to analyze that. Karl Mannheim is one of
Yes.
yeah, like he's a German scholar who wrote a lot about ideologies, and then I sort of like like assessed what sort of like ideology Occupy Wall Street had, because at the time people were saying, oh, this is so confusing, you have so many demands, we don't really understand what you're talking about, uh, and people were saying this is not going to last as a movement because they're incoherent. And then I said, well, actually they do have a coherence, and they're coming from a particular ideology. How has this influenced my life now and my career? I used to be interested in political theory and political ideology, and I still am, but that's not my work anymore. I've like really so lots of things changed when I was in my last year in university. Basically, I realized that I didn't want to be a lawyer. So in between third year and fourth year, I did an internship abroad. And then I realized, yeah, like I wanted to travel and live elsewhere. And I didn't want to stay in the Philippines at the time. And then going into law school means that I would have to stay for 4 more years. So I kind of like changed my plan, and instead tried to get into development work via NGOs. And so I did that, but still retaining that interest in political ideology on the side. So now I'm very much focused on development and humanitarian work for NGOs.
Ah, okay. So that's a nice segue. Tell us about what you did afterwards. So you
Um,
graduated in 2012, didn't you?
yes, I did. I graduated in
Yeah.
2012, and then
Can you
um,
imagine? It's been 8 years.
it's been 8 years. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.
Oh, that's sad. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very
That was
sad.
that
Like,
was my
yeah,
first year of teaching, just fresh from
yeah,
my PhD. Oh,
yeah. It was quite fast. But anyway, so I graduated, and then I got an offer to do an internship in Thailand, actually, first with Save the Children in Thailand, and thanks to the help of Sir Leland, because I think he knew someone who was working there, and then I submitted my CV, and then I stayed there for like a month or two, and then I got an opportunity to work in Edinburgh, where I'm at now, in Edinburgh, for a small grassroots organization called the United Nations Association, which aimed to promote
okay.
the UN to civil society. And I did that for a couple of months. Then I went back to the Philippines to work for Save the Children for a couple of months again. And then I permanently moved to the UK because I wanted to be here, and I had a job offer here as well. I then moved to London, and then I worked for the Red Cross here in London. Um, yeah, I went to London and then worked for the Red Cross in London for nearly 3 years. I was actually working on Typhoon Haiyan project. So through my work, I got to go back to the Philippines and then support the Typhoon Haiyan response there. And then after that, I decided to do my master's. And then after that, I worked for Save the Children for a year, and then now I'm with ActionAid. So I actually jumped with a lot of organizations. But
Time out. So where are you now? Which
I'm
organization are you with right now?
with ActionAid UK. So it's based in London, and it's focused on women and girls' rights. They're usually focused on like long-term sort of like rights and empowerment work, but I'm specifically within the humanitarian team. So working within those organizations, and I think this is
Yes.
something that might not be clear for me, at least when I was a student, this was not clear, but actually organizations really separate, international organizations at least, really separate out their development and humanitarian work. They even have sometimes completely different departments for those two types of works. But yeah, throughout my career, I've been focused on humanitarian.
So say that again. So international organizations make a distinction between development work long term and
Yeah.
humanitarian work,
Yes.
humanitarian relief.
Yeah.
Why? Because now I asked that, RB, because now I'm not sure if you're familiar in the DS program. We now, and this goes out to everybody else who's listening, we have a new minor in humanitarian action, and every year we've been attracting about 15 or so students in that minor. We continue to create new courses under that minor, and we have a very different take on humanitarian action. We're not calling it humanitarian work. We're not calling it humanitarian relief. We're calling it humanitarian action, because the assumption is that humanitarian work would fail eventually if there's no development thinking that goes into it, which is the long-term one, as you might know already.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
what's with the distinction? What's with the distinction? And then we're gonna take the questions by Richard and Camille.
Yeah, no, I completely
Hi.
agree. And that's why over the past few years, in the international space at least, they're now talking about
Yeah.
the development and humanitarian nexus. They're seeing that humanitarian,
Yes.
they're finally realizing, these international people, they're finally realizing that humanitarian is a development problem, and that humanitarian can't, you can't,
Yes.
the goal is for the humanitarian action to be localized. That's why there's a localization agenda. Um,
Yes.
but there is a distinction because, well, firstly, the histories are different. So development work really, I think, if I'm not mistaken, its history, its commonly accepted history started with like the Marshall Plan, and like loans to help sort of like countries with their long-term economic development. Whereas humanitarian relief had, I think, its origins have, from what we understood, how we understand humanitarian aid has its origins in, like the Red Cross, like Battle of Solferino, like taking care of
Mm.
those wounded in the war. So those two histories are quite different.
Totoo.
So that's the first point. The second point, and I think this is really important, is the governance and funding mechanisms that the international aid sector has. They're very different. So so funders like USAID, for example, or the Department for International
Yes.
Development, the UK, will have like different funding mechanisms for what they call development versus humanitarian work. And because of those two different funding
Yes.
mechanisms require different bureaucracies to administer them. And so you have like these really different teams working on it.
That's a very, very sharp observation that you have there, RB. It's interesting kasi it's my observation naman. I mean, working with local communities here, and you use the right word, yung nexus. In fact, we're calling it triple nexus: development,
Yeah.
humanitarian, and then peace building. And
Yeah.
we recognize yung faith-based organizations work here. At the level of the communities, it doesn't matter, diba? The distinctions don't really matter. They all
Yeah.
happen all at the same time. And it's just funny at the level of your funding agencies there in the global north, the structures are still lagging behind.
Yes.
Which is what Camille Madis is trying to ask you now. Sa Action Aid UK daw, is humanitarian work often left behind compared to development programs? Can you answer that?
So sorry, what do you mean left behind? Like in what sense?
Camille, you want to pitch in, jump in, butt in? Comes.
Not
Hi,
left.
can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you, Comes.
Yeah.
Where are you now?
At home in Laguna, I'm also with an INGO, Plan International. So my question is if it's less prioritized humanitarian work, because like you,
Ah.
it's still very distinguished in my org as well.
Yeah.
Like you have less
Comes, which
people
batch
in
are you? Sorry.
humanitarian compared to programmatic efforts.
Yeah. Nako, Plan. That's our main competition. Women and girls. Joke. So I think it depends on the organization it depends on the organization. In my experience, in some organizations, there's a lot of focus on humanitarian work in like the humanitarian team. In some organizations, not so much. In Action Aid, just because traditionally they're focused more on longer term women's rights work, I would say the humanitarian team is smaller. Hindi naman siya less prioritized, but like they see humanitarian work as just one component of their long-term work for women and girls' rights. So they say, okay,
Right.
so our main work is long-term change from women and girls, and one way that we can do this is through humanitarian work. When there's a humanitarian emergency, usually that's evidence suggests that that's a good time where power relations are disrupted, and if we
Yes.
try to do our movement building during that situation, then that will help change women and girls' rights for the long term.
Unless in and out, di ba? Unless parachute lang. Humanitarian relief and then you're out.
Yeah, and that's not the kind of humanitarian work that we aspire to do. But what we want to do is like longer term change talaga. So at Action Aid, we have this thing called the humanitarian signature, where we focus on shifting the power, women's
Yeah.
leadership, and accountability. So those three elements we think should be present in the humanitarian work that we do. That has to
Oh
be
my
really
goodness. Those are all exciting stuff, RB. Kams, thank you for that question. I really feel like a talk show host, I have to admit. No, we've got another question from Portia, sophomore. Portia, are you in the house? You want to say that, or do you want me to just ask that? Portia, going. Okay, let's do it. Okay, thanks, Portia. Portia's question is really, this is important. What kind of project did you do for yeah, Portia, that's fine. What kind of project did you do for Typhoon Haiyan victims? Yan. Or for affected populations of Typhoon Haiyan?
Yeah. So
Action Aid ka na nun, ano? Action Aid ka na nun?
Red Cross.
Action Aid ka na nun? Red Cross. This was in what? 2000, after 2014, you went in.
Yeah, so that was 2013 to 2016. The
16, okay.
project. But I joined 2015. I joined 2015. So
Cool.
what the Red Cross did was so basically for humanitarian response, usually we understand it in phases. So the first phase is the immediate response, and then you have the longer phase, which is the recovery. So I was only there for the recovery, but I can also talk a little bit about the response because I knew the background of like what they were doing. But basically, yeah, response is usually like conduct a rapid needs assessment, and then it's more like logistics, like distribute food, distribute non-food items like jerry cans or whatever, distribute cash. At the time, cash was still quite new and not a lot of organizations were doing it. So a lot of that was, and then distribute temporary shelters. And the first phase usually happens in the first 3 to 6 months. So yan yung response phase. I wasn't there. And then for the recovery, what we did was we were working, so the entire Red Cross was working all over the Philippines. I was with the British Red Cross. And what the Red Cross did, and it's actually a good example, is yung approach ng Red Cross is that the National Red Cross will lead the response. So it's not like, the American Red Cross will come in and they will do whatever. British Red Cross will come in and they will do whatever. No, that's not the approach. The approach was Philippines Red Cross will lead it, you follow. And so they were the ones who coordinated us. They said, okay, American Red Cross, dito kayo. British Red Cross, dito kayo. And then we were working in Iloilo. And syempre, I was fine with it kasi I'm Ilonggo. I'm from Bacolod originally, so I can even talk to when I was visiting, I was talking to the people, and obviously in Ilonggo, in Hiligaynon. And then what we did was for the recovery, We did shelter reconstruction. We did livelihoods, so livelihoods diversification, group savings. We organized the farmers and the small entrepreneurs into groups so that they can collectively pitch in money and then manage that on their own. We were doing water and sanitation work. We were doing what they call multi-sectoral, so different sectors, so that you ensure that there's a long-term recovery. We were even doing insurance for if there's another
Wow.
farmers can claim against insurance, which was pretty innovative at the time.
Arbie, time out. Leland has a question. Sir Leland.
Okay.
Arbie, we've been asking the people we've been interviewing what their biggest challenge has been or the most challenging experience you've had in your career so far.
Challenging experience. Yeah, so I think something that I could talk about is my experience in Mozambique. So I was working for Save the Children at the time. So this was 2019. This was last year. And there was Cyclone Idai, which affected Mozambique, but also Zimbabwe and Malawi. And I was selected to be part of the surge, so the first phase response surge. So I went there with our team, and that was my first phase one experience, and that was really difficult. Just because, firstly, on a personal level, it's really stressful. Like you work up to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop. It was really intense. You like live with your colleagues. You're in this small office. Everyone's stressed out. Everyone has their different coping mechanisms. So it was really, really stressful. But at the same time, responding to a sudden onset emergency with a large bureaucracy, you're working with the UN, you're working with your own bureaucracy. You know, the bureaucracy and the internal politics, I think, is something that is not talked about very often. It's not very talked about very often. And that's really the main blockage. It's like these mechanisms that organizations create for themselves, the UN creates for themselves, it makes response hard. And at the same time, there are parang, you know, different incentives within the UN and the NGO system that doesn't really contribute to a good response. And so you're trying to navigate these systems and you're trying to like do everything you can, and it's really challenging.
Arbie, when you say navigate, what do you mean exactly by that? Is it about challenging decisions? Is it about occupying as you did in Ateneo? Or
Yeah.
what's navigating like in an international development organization?
Yeah. So I guess like firstly, there's fundraising pressure for international organizations. So there is pressure to raise as much money as you can because some organizations feel that is what raises their profile, and that is evidence of them working if they raise a huge amount of money. I would argue that in the first place, that is not such a good incentive, because then what it results into a more funding and donor-led response rather than the actual needs of communities. And so there were moments when a donor would say, okay, we can give you this huge amount of money, but you have to do this. But then our needs assessment would say, well, actually, we don't need that. This other community needs this. That's a much better way of using the resources. And then they will say, well, if you don't do what we say, you won't get the money. But
Classic,
then we have,
isn't it?
it's like, okay, fine, like let's just do what the donor says, and like let's implement this, even though we think there are other needs. And it's not like it's not needed, but you're trying to prioritize everything all of a sudden. And then at the same time, people are in need. In a sudden onset disaster, people are like already hungry, people don't have anything. But then because of the system, you have to submit a proposal, you have to
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
do a due diligence, you have to be able to pass their audit. So parang grabe talaga yung bureaucracy, and sometimes that hinders effective response.
Arby, I'm so glad that you're talking about this because these are lessons that I think every development worker and the student have to take into consideration. It's not paradise, once you enter the development work, and I am very much aware of exactly what you're talking about. RB, time out. We've got plenty of questions, and we're already halfway through the session. There's a question about grad school.
Yes.
What happened? At what point did you decide to do grad school? Every DS major, I think, wants to pursue grad school somewhere, somehow, something related to development. Tell us
Yeah.
about that, and then later on, I'm going to ask you whether it was worth it pursuing that degree, no, sa development, or should you have been more disciplinal, for example,
Yeah.
doing sociology, for example, or
Yeah.
economics.
So I did my master's at the London School of Economics. I did it. I did a master's in international development and humanitarian emergencies. So still development and humanitarian work. I did it in 2017 to 2018. I applied because I knew so many people who went to LSE, like colleagues who are in London, like British people who are in London. I knew them, and I really liked their style and their approach to things. And I was like, shit, that's my dream school. Like, let's apply. I really did not think I was gonna get in because, to be honest, I didn't have the best grades when I was in Ateneo. But I got in somehow. I think for my course in particular, they really prefer people with work experience. And I applied in the middle of my stay in London. I've already worked and then I applied. And they really prefer people with experience for that particular course. So yeah, I was able to get in. The modules were, you can choose your own modules. So I chose some that are more development focused, some that are more humanitarian. I was interested in refugees as well, so I did my master's dissertation in refugees. So nothing to do with the Philippines again.
No.
No. And then yeah, it was. And then yeah, to briefly answer your question, is it worth it? Like yeah, absolutely. I think it is worth it. Like for the learning experience, and also because a lot of jobs out there are looking for people with a master's degree, unfortunately.
And you were mentored by great people like Duncan Green.
Yes. So Duncan Green, I don't know if people are aware, but he is the author of How Change Happens and From Poverty to Power. He is still working with Oxfam, but he's also a professor at LSE, and he was my thesis advisor. And until
Was
now, we have
he?
yeah, and until now we have a good relationship. So yeah, he I already knew a little bit before about this, but he also really fostered this idea of complexity and systems thinking. So now, like circling back to your question earlier, before I was interested in ideology and I was like a Marxist and like that, and now I'm interested in complexity and systems thinking, and because of that, I'm actually quite pragmatic now in terms of my ideology. It's I recognize the limits and the faults of ideologies, and I'm more pragmatic in the way I approach things.
Full swing from J.L. Cornelio to Leland de la Cruz. Full swing.
Exactly.
Arby, what did you learn from that grad program that you would not have otherwise learned, say, from a disciplinal training? Pero ako, my master's was in applied sociology. Very
Yeah.
disciplinal. How different Was your training, say, from the usual route, sociology, pol sci,
Yeah.
economics,
So I think it's also to do with the school. So obviously, like London School of Economics is very much economics oriented. So
Okay,
and I have like very little training in econ. I did Econ 101 at Ateneo, and
you
then that's
did.
it. I did, yeah. I mean, it was compulsory. So, but then that's it. I did not have any further economics training. So I came there, and I think this also contributed with my shift in ideology. So I came there, with quite like a sociology, social sciences background, and
Mhm.
then they throw at you these economic concepts. They expect you to be able to read a regression table and all these economic analysis. And um, I actually found it quite useful. It allowed me to really become more evidence based when analyzing things. And I think it's a useful skill and background knowledge to have to know these economic concepts. Um, uh, and because it was multidisciplinary, so it was interdisciplinary as well, like you get
Mhm.
you're able to synthesize it. So what you learn from a more sociological or anthropological course, you're able to evidence with like the economic impacts, for example. And I definitely appreciated that.
Oo nga. Tapos RB, I mean, again, for the sake of everybody, no, in the of all the other participants, you said something about not getting good grades in college, but LSE wanted a work experience. So, what's your advice to those who want to pursue grad school and who feel that they were not good enough, quote unquote? I don't really believe in that, but anyway, it's there, that
Yeah,
discourse. The good enough in college. What can you
yeah.
say? How can
So
they
I
prepare
think
for grad school?
Yeah, I think firstly we're in a slight disadvantage in the Philippines because in the UK they understand that the first year of university might be like your transition period. So actually, in the final grade that you get after graduating, they only count the final 2 years. They don't count the first year and the second year. And for me, the first year and the second year were my lowest grades, and then I improved third year, fourth year. So I'm always thinking, if they just don't count the first 2 years, I would actually have a nice QPI. So yeah, quite disadvantage to that. I think I know that people say grades don't matter, right? And to some extent,
Mhm.
that's true. Grades don't matter, especially if you know exactly what you want to work and stuff. Um, but what you want actually changes. Your preference change over time, and
Okay.
the sad reality is that if you want to pursue a grad school, you'll do it better. You'll be able to get more admitted better or more easily if you have better grades. So be mindful of your grades, and that's something that I always regret myself. Like I wish I was more mindful of my grades in the first 2 years. But apart from that, like work experience really counts. Get that experience and yeah, get that experience. And then my final tip would be to frame yourself in the best way possible. So these people, applying to grad school, they judge you on paper. Usually, there's rarely interviews. You just submit your a CV, your grades, and a
Yeah.
supporting statement. And if you have a supporting statement that can really weave a coherent and compelling narrative about yourself, then obviously you can sell yourself more. So frame yourself in a nice way. And I used my global south card when I was applying to LSE. I was like, I'm from the global south. I have like a more unique experience. I see it from like a global south perspective. And I think they bought it. So
Hi, nako, Leland and I have a term for that, di ba? Strategic poverty.
yeah, strategic poverty. Totoo yun.
Strategic poverty. Oh, but no, but it's part of framing yourself, and you're not necessarily denying naman, di ba, who you
Yeah,
are
yeah,
as somebody
exactly.
from the global south.
Yeah.
You're not being fake. You're just being informative. RB, we do have a few questions about lessons learned from DS, and let's start with that. Patrick has a question. What were the big lessons that you picked up from DS that helped you in international development?
Um, sure. Like I think I'm gonna talk about like the broader thing first, and then the details second. So in terms of the broader thing, I think like knowing these theories that you learn from Sir Leland's class or Sir Jail's class, yung new institutional economics or like the capability approach, that will really frame the way you see development because not all not everyone will agree on what development means, and certainly not all organizations agree on what development means. There are broad differences between what one organization means and approach development and progress and what others do. And so by learning all these competing theories, you're able to inform yourself and make a decision for yourself and say, for me, this is what development means and this is how best to achieve it. Now, in terms of the details, I would say in terms of your career as well, because a lot of people, even here in the UK, a lot of young people say, "Oh, I want to work in international development, or I want to work in the development sector." But
Yes.
what does that mean? So I think something that would really help you is if you determine what exactly you want to do. Do you want to do communications? Do you want to do fundraising? Do you want to do project management? Do you want to do advocacy? So within a development organization, there are different roles that you can do. And at this early stage in your life, I would suggest volunteering, taking an internship, or taking a job in these different things so that you're able to see what it's like. This is what it's like to be a program manager. This is what it's like to be an advocacy officer. This is like what it's like to work in the water and sanitation sector or in the health sector. There are really so many different things to do there. So if you really want to work in the development sector, be specific and try to figure out what you want to do. Oddly enough, something that really helped me was, I don't know if we still offer this, but during my time, we had to take a project management course. And looking back, I'm like, because now I work in project management. Looking back now, I'm like, yeah, like that was actually quite a helpful course because I think people see me as more theoretical and more like, oh, he likes political ideologies or whatever. But actually now I'm so deep into project management and I really love it.
Arbie, I'm going to come back to that later on as we end our conversation. It's a more existential but also practical question. I'll come back to that. But we need to entertain Earl Dicena's question. How have you been able to see and apply what you learned about systems thinking and development work? Systems thinking.
Yes, great question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess like there was this. I mean, like before all this sort of like new thinking and development, there was a very rigid way of looking at development, which is that, okay, if you do a project and you do these inputs and you put these activities, you get a result. It's very linear.
Yes.
But obviously, that's not how the real world works. There's complications, things change rapidly. And so now we recognize that there is complexity and that we work in systems and that even like a small change in the local context will have various impact. Think of the butterfly effect, diba? Like parang one flap of a butterfly's wings will create a storm somewhere. So that's the butterfly effect. So it's the same in development. Like one tiny thing can alter your development project. So now there is sort of like an emergent thinking around more adaptive development, adaptive management, adaptive governance. And that's essentially applying complexity and systems thinking in development. And there's a bunch of literature out there from doing development differently, which I suggest you guys should look, to thinking and working politically. There's a bunch out there. Duncan Green is actually like a pioneer in this. But, and I would say this is from a very global North perspective again. I think it doesn't really take into account like what the global South has to say about it. A slight sort of like self-promotion, but because of this, I think I founded my own initiative, and it's called Aid Reimagined, and it's basically trying to marry thinking around systems thinking and complexity with thinking around decolonization, and then thinking around more economic evidence-based rigorous analysis. So marrying all of these three different nascent branches of development thinking into like a cohesive framework. So if you check out Aid Reimagined, I actually talked a lot about how to reform the aid system, especially yung mga bureaucracy na I talked about earlier, how to change and reform the bureaucracies to make it a more effective, but also a more just aid sector.
Arbie, what would, I mean, that's encouraging, that's inspiring. Arbie, what would you say to our, for the lack of a better term, the more progressive DS majors who don't like aid? They think it's neo-colonial, it's hegemonic. Now that you're there in that sector.
So I've thought about this a lot, and I would start with the fact that you can't stop other people from helping other people. So if you start with that philosophical basis, you know, people are always going to help people, and it's either they help in a way that could cause harm, or either you advocate for a way to harness their altruism to truly change the world in a more systematic way. So yeah, you can say, well, actually, we don't like aid, and we reject that, and we reject helping and whatever. But that's just not how it is. So me, now that I'm pragmatic, I start with what is, and what is that people help other people, and governments have aid budgets. And so let's start with that reality, and then work with that to create a fairer and more just aid system. And I think it is possible to create a fairer and more just aid system.
Arbie, that's very, very important. Arbie, yes, yeah. Leland has a question. Are you okay with extending a little bit?
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
are you gonna charge us now? You're not, diba?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So Uriel Escobedo has a question. What was your most fulfilling work or project thus far?
Most fulfilling work or project?
Yeah. Is that even a fair question to ask? Because the development sector is always
It's always fulfilling.
exciting. It's always fulfilling, except the bureaucracy. I really don't like the bureaucracy.
Yeah. To be honest, parang wala namang one significant thing. I don't know. I really, a fulfilling aspect of my work is really sort of like the field visits and getting to see the project and getting to talk to the communities that we work with. I think that's always fulfilling, especially, you know, for me, that might not be true or that it might be less applicable to people who are actually working there, like you guys or some of you guys who are working embedded in the communities. But for someone who works at the headquarters in London and, you know, in my desk most of the time, like I think going out there and being able to just see the work is really fulfilling. And I think that's a cheesy response, pero it's
Arbie, this is a classic question that those of us who have left the country get asked, you know. You clearly love the country, the Philippines, diba, when you were a student and you were all for nation building and so forth with a very critical bent. No? What is it like now that you're not in the country? Do you have those existential dilemma? Do you have those questions?
I have to be honest. Like when I was in the Philippines, like, and I know, Gio and Serlina knows that, I would always write critical posts about like the country and like look at this government or look at our community or look at our culture or whatever. And I don't think that way
My God,
anymore.
yes. You
Yeah,
don't. Okay.
yeah, I don't think that way anymore. And
Teka. Can you articulate that bit a little bit more? So what do you not think like anymore?
nah,
And then what do you and how do you see things now in yeah, in
yeah, I
context?
guess I used to blame, let's say, culture, right? Like culture and like Filipino culture is this or that, or Filipino communities are this or that, or Filipino people are this or that. And
I
fine,
remember. Yeah.
to some extent, culture is a factor of why things are the way they are in the Philippines. But also, and maybe you talk about this in the new institutional economics lesson, we're also like living in a particular institutional context. We are the way we are, like Filipinos are the way we are, Filipino society is the way it is because of certain historical and political institutions that is completely not the fault of current citizens. And by
Mm.
recognizing that, I think you're just a little bit more humble and a little less aggressive. For me, at least, it helped me become a little like look at Philippines with a kinder eyes. Like that realization that yeah, of course, like this is not just culture. It's also interlinked with global inequalities and colonization, for example. Um, and you can't blame Filipinos for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and my experience from here is, of course, like I'm frustrated sometimes that there's so many things I'm angry about in the Philippines, but I can't exactly like directly help because I'm here. But also, like I think I recognize that I'm on my own sort of like personal journey of discovery and knowledge, and I wanna sort of like hopefully someday take back my knowledge and learning, and who knows, maybe I go back to the Philippines and I'm as a better and more equipped person who can sort of like deal with the issues there as an individual. So yeah, I'm happy that I'm here, but at the same time I wish I could help more. But there are always ways to help, like even sort of like vocalizing your opinions on social media, which I do. I think hopefully that helps.
Alam mo, that's a very important realization. I would reserve my opinion on that, no, and especially because it's one of those not only existential but also partly moral, di ba? Parang what is or ethical, if you will. Di ba? And this is a question that that
Yeah,
most developmentalists are interested in community development, our own communities. Why be in, for example, in an international development organization? You know,
and
mga ganong klaseng conversations
yeah,
and
and I want to add as well, like
yes,
through initiatives like Aid Reimagined and through my sort of like vocal advocacy of like decolonizing development and decolonizing aid, like I hope that I'm sort of like adding a voice here from our side in the global north and
mm,
global north spaces of
yeah,
advocating for like national locally led development. Because yeah, like sadly a lot of a huge part of the international development sector where a lot of the funding comes from for development workers in the Philippines or elsewhere, they still
yes,
have this old traditional mindset of like, oh, aid, yeah, people there don't have capacity, let's train them, let's impose this structure and let's impose this way of working and let's impose this idea on them. And that's not the development that I believe in. So by pushing back on that narrative from this side, then hopefully that's a way that I'm also helping.
Right. RB, alam mo, sobrang ano to, very fruitful conversation that we're having. We're This is a question I'd like to pose to you. You said a while ago that somebody who works in development, you can do a lot of things to change how development is done. Um, sige, let me use Camille Madis's question and then i-segue ko dito sa finale question ko. Camille has this question: how influence change within Action Aid UK? This is related to navigating bureaucracy, I suppose, and you being the Global South development person there. Yeah, this is a very nice segue into my last question. Yeah.
Yeah, so I yeah, it's quite difficult, especially when organizations and sort of like the system is so old, and it's hard to change because because of the bureaucracy and the internal politics, right? But um, and this is my pragmatic side, sort of like coming out, and maybe people will disagree, but um, I think firstly, I recognize that change comes from all the different angles. So internal change is not enough. You also need external change. So you need sort of like activists, you need alongside reformers. So it's not revolution or reform, it's both. Both are needed to enact social change. I just so happen to find myself as an insider within the system. And so how do I change it from the inside? From the inside, a strategy that works is, by playing their own game. And like if you understand the international development system enough, you're able to navigate it. And I say that because there are a lot of critics outside. There are a lot of critics who say, development organizations are this or that. It's neo-colonial. Like etc. They waste money, etc. So there are a lot of critics, and that's good because we're supposed to be accountable. But a lot of these criticisms actually don't understand the ins and outs of the aid system. And once you understand it really in depth from inside, then you're able to navigate your way within it. And when I say sort of like playing the game, it's like, maybe in your first 2-3 years in your career, just play along, establish your reputation, build your relationships with different people, show that you are a hard worker and that you'll do as you're told. And then once you've established that relationship, then you can begin to nudge and influence people a little bit. Find your allies. Start with a small project. Maybe suggest in a meeting that, this is maybe we should do this. What do you think? Which is a far cry from staging an Occupy protest and protesting with simp signs. But I think that's, if you're in the inside, that's how it works.
RB, in a way, you demonstrate your life, your trajectory, and this is how we are ending. Your life trajectory demonstrates how development work has changed you. And this is, I suppose, the important reflection that we need to make here. It's not so much you making a difference to Action Aid or to international development only, but it's also about how this international development environment has changed you. How would you assess the change that you are? I mean, Leland very clearly is happy that you are now a pragmatic idealist. You're no longer the Manheimian Marxist occupying student.
Sorry, I think there's a
Lag? One more time? Do you want me to say that again?
yes.
Lag.
Okay. So parang RB, are you
Go, Jail, go. I
on
think there's a lag for Jail, but the question seems to be How has
Oh,
development
okay.
work changed you?
Yeah, yeah. I got the gist of the question. Um, so one quote from Sir Leland that I always come back to is that if all you have is a hammer, then all the problem that you see is nails, right? If you only look at one thing from one perspective, then you think it can solve everything. And as like back then as a student,
Sure.
and infatuated with like theories and ideas, that was very much like me. Like I was like, okay, Marxist ideology, this is how we solve it. Markets are bad, free markets are bad, ganyan.
Yes.
But what I realized is when you start with the people and when you start with the context and when you start with the community, sometimes they challenge your own assumptions. Sometimes what they want is, yeah, we want roads so we can access the market. So then how does that marry with your anti-free market ideology? Sometimes they want this, and then it challenges your own assumptions. So I guess,
Got it.
you know, um, yeah, like start with what people want, what local communities want, and start with what's real, and what is actually happening, and recognize that um, there are always sort of like different solutions to different problems in different contexts,
Got
because
this. Mhm.
the world is complex. The world is not simple. The world is not linear. And by understanding that, then you can then you can be more pragmatic in your approach. And I think it's a more humble approach, really, pragmatism.
Yeah, I'm sure Dr. De La Cruz is very pleased to hear that.
Yeah, for
RB,
sure.
last question. We've got this question from Rohan. She's my thesis student right now. Sabi niya, beloved son, ano ba yan? sabi, sorry. Rohan is asking, is there a network, formal or otherwise, that's mobilizing Filipinos based abroad who work in foreign aid humanitarian action? Social capital. Do you have a community of Filipinos there in development work? Or are you a lone ranger from the Philippines? What are you doing in development work? Why are you not um, in the health sector, for example? Ganun.
No, great question. I'm actually in every sort of like conference, mission, every deployment that I've been to, I always meet Filipinos. Filipinos are actually quite well known within the development and humanitarian, especially the humanitarian sector. So there's a lot of us out there. There's no formal network. Sadly, I think I did try to do it once. I made this Facebook group of Filipinos in international development, but it didn't take off. So, I mean, it's a good idea. If you want to start it, or maybe I can revive the Facebook group, then that would be cool. But, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter or whatever. And then, yeah, like, I think that would be nice, actually.
RB, yes, we should do that. And I think also because there's a growing number of DS graduates in international development. It's already a clear career path for our graduates, you and Anais and many si Yong Kongko, at least the students that I have handled, I know that many of you are already out there, and this is a promising path. DS is making waves around the world. RB, final words for our audience, for everybody who is listening, tuned in. Um, is it worth it? Is it worth it?
Yeah.
Or yeah,
Yes, absolutely yes. Like unqualified, yes. Yes, it's worth it. And I think that, one of my insecurities was like, oh, I'm a development studies graduate from Ateneo. How can I compete with like international people who went to fancier universities? We absolutely are in a good position. Like the development studies program of Ateneo is like comparable, I would say, and that we we have that knowledge, and so don't feel insecure about that. And that I think the DS, as a DS graduate of Ateneo, you should be proud. And if you go into the development sector and humanitarian sector, yeah, I think it's absolutely worth it. It's hard. You won't earn as much money as your management friends, maybe. But it's, this is the work, right? And the work is the work. And yeah, we're out here trying to change the world. And it's, these days especially, it's difficult, but it's, it can't be helped. You just got to do it.
Right. Arbie, thank you. Let's hear from my talent manager, your father, Dr. De La Cruz. Do you have anything else to say? And then let's draw this to a close.
No, nothing. Thank you very much, Arbie.
Thank you very much, guys.
And thanks, JNeil, for hosting the show.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Arbie, really, it's wonderful seeing you. I haven't seen you in a long while. I think the last time I saw you was when you left, when you were about to leave for the UK. And look where you are right now. Just inspiring, to be honest. And the shift and the transitions that you have undergone, quite inspiring. I hope that, and I believe that many others have found your stories inspiring as well. Thank you so much, Arbie. Enjoy your scones there, and being isolated from people.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll thank Arbie.
Maraming salamat. Maraming salamat. You take care there. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bakit may tanong ano no?
Boy.
Thanks, guys!